Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Propcast. My name is Louisa Dickens, host of the Propcast and co-founder of Elamori, the global PropTech recruitment and search consultancy. In this podcast, we'll explore how the digital evolution of the real estate industry is impacting the property market. The aim of each episode is to introduce you to a PropTech innovator and discuss how their work has created a shift in focus when it comes down to digitising the built environment. If you're interested in finding out more about PropTech or applying for a job in this space, or keen to know who the big players are that are moving and shaking the real estate industry up, we have you covered, and we will be bringing you an episode each week to connect to the VCs, PropTech startups and real estate professionals from around the globe. Also, a big shout out to our sponsors of the podcast, ReamTech and Pretech, who you will hear from during the episode. On today's podcast, I'm joined by two women who I've been closely following not only their successful personal journeys, but their company's involvement within the ever-growing and topical climate sustainability tech space. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to obviously Serene, who is CEO and co-founder of Senseware, and obviously Sara Anzinger, who's the Vice President of Capital Markets at the well-known Measurabl. So welcome to the show, ladies.
Nice to be here. No, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Louisa. Good to be here with you.
Usually I introduce both my guests, but I thought I'd change it up a bit because Serene and Sara can tell their stories a lot better than I can. So let's actually get started in the questions, but we'll obviously hear from both of them, obviously how they got into the space. We'll hear from Sara, her journey from sustainability finance, which I didn't quite know what it was, to ESG. They'll talk us through how Serene went from being, founding women. We will be chatting through the famous three letters that everyone loves talking about. So obviously the ESG and how technology can really play a part in assisting the sort of climate crisis and obviously reducing it. After this, we'll be hearing about what changes they've seen in adoption in real estate and also the common misconceptions of the value of the product across geographies. And now Sara's obviously worked not only in the US, but obviously in Europe too. So it'd be good to draw some comparisons there. And then we'll finish off with obviously hearing a little bit more about basically future predictions they are sort of expecting. As I mentioned, let's start off the show first. We're hearing from both the ladies. So we'll start with Serene. How did you become the founder of Senseware? And also please let our audience know a bit more about your IT product and how it's changing real estate.
Yes, sure. So the origin story of Senseware is interesting. It touches on how starting a business is never a straight line. And basically, the idea originated in Portugal, so in Europe. And I was there for my PhD research. I was presenting my work in a conference there. It was around healthcare. And my co-founder, Julian Stamatakis, was also doing the same. He was presenting his PhD work. And I attended his session, and it was around how using sensors such as accelerometers can improve the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease patients because the sensor can pick up on things that doctors' naked eye cannot.
Yeah.
And he also mentioned how it would be nice to add other sensors to the mix, like gyroscopes and sensors like that, but that it was too late for him to actually incorporate new sensors without redeveloping the whole technology. But that was an area of improvement in that research. And that just was a light bulb moment for me. And I met with him after the conference and I said, tell me more about this issue. And as we talked about it, we quickly realized that this could be really interesting technology to develop where we're able to connect any type of sensor or data source into one system without having to redevelop every time we add new type of data, sensor data. And that was that whole beginning of the idea of Senseware. We wanted to go in the healthcare space given both of our backgrounds, but again, we go where the market is, as we were talking about this technology that can connect to any sensor, can get real-time data very quickly, very easily. A lot of the interest came from the built environment ecosystem. So owners, operators of building, construction professionals, building technology manufacturers that came to us and said, can you connect and get real-time data from the sensors in our building, energy, air quality, and things like that? Well, we can. And we just went where the market took us. And here we are today. We're focused on applying the technology in the built environment ecosystem.
Congratulations. No doubt you've seen a massive surge in people probably wanting to use your product, especially since the year we've just had. God, because obviously you said the built environment, but you cover all the spaces from what medical, entertainment venues, schools, commercial. Like when people think of the built environment, and for our audience listening in or people trying to learn about prop tech, people just think, oh, maybe just offices or maybe just residential. There's so many things that come into it. And Sarah, what about you? Because obviously your background is sustainable finance specifically, and now you're obviously working at Measurabl, you're leading up sort of capital markets. How did you get to where you are now? And what is your sort of remit of your role? Lots of people and those who are listening to this and have any questions, please feel free to email in and ask what sort of avenues you can get into space from. But what does the role actually entail? Is it finance related? Is it strategic? Is it business development? Yeah, tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for the question. It's been a long journey here. I actually started my career in traditional commercial real estate finance and banking. Spent some time at Royal Bank of Canada and PNC Bank in the US before doing my graduate studies in Amsterdam and spending some time with GRESB, which many in the real estate space are probably familiar with as an industry standard for ESG assessment and benchmarking of real estate vehicles, and worked on the debt side there, given that was what I knew. And then spent some time as well at Fitch Ratings, so in the credit ratings industry, in structured finance, rating CMBS transactions, and getting the opportunity there to help establish their sustainable finance group and looking at how ESG could be more transparently communicated to investors in terms of how it was being taken into consideration in fundamental analysis and how it was impacting the ratings that we were assigning to all kinds of entities, so cross-sectorally, not just real estate related. It was really through that process of being drawn to furthering sustainable finance and seeing how important data was to being able to see that market grow and being able to further the sort of credible verification of impacts associated with allocation of proceeds around sustainable finance instruments, that I became interested in working for a tech company. And Measurabl was really at the nexus of all of those things. A SaaS company specifically focused on the real estate sector and very much engaged in making ESG data collection and analytics and reporting simpler for owners and operators. So that's what brought me to Measurabl. And then in terms of my specific role there as SVP of capital markets, it is all of the things that you touched on. So it's both strategic, it's product development, it's R&D, a bit of sales, which is really nice for me. It's very much a hybrid role, but essentially it's to look at how we as a company can grow and move into serving both new customer segments. So what we might use the umbrella term of capital markets for, so including ratings agencies, real estate lenders, insurers, et cetera, as looking for more data in order to incorporate in their own business practices, but also how we can better connect our own customers and real estate owner operators to finance, to access to capital through ESG and through the data that they are collecting through our platform and able to better disclose.
Here is a message from our sponsor, Michael Beckerman from Cretech.
Hey, this is Michael Beckerman from Cretech. I'm here to invite you to check out Cretech Plus, the first streaming platform devoted to innovation and technology in the built world, featuring new weekly videos from the world's leading real estate and tech professionals. The first month of streaming is absolutely free, and then you could use the code LMRE to receive 25% off your second month. To learn more, visit plus.cretech.com.
And so both your businesses are heavily involved in the real estate sector. Sarah, you obviously mentioned ESG. You also mentioned the word impact, and that's what both your businesses are having on the real estate sector, and it's changing it. Sarah, would you like to walk us through the ESG components of Measurabl and how it directly impacts the climate crisis? Because I think lots of our listeners are trying to understanding more about real estate's role to play, but how it directly can impact what's happening to the climate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of just a high level view, the built environment is arguably the largest asset class in the world and contributes roughly 40% of greenhouse gas emissions globally. So there's outsized impact and therefore I think outsized opportunity in terms of transforming the built environment. What Measurabl does in that space is offer essentially an ESG data management platform to help automate data collection at the building level, which historically, has been done through spreadsheets, and it's quite cumbersome and prone to error. In fact, our founder and CEO, Matt Ellis, was previously sustainability director at CBRE. And it was really in that role that he saw the deep need for that type of support for owner operators, especially as GRESB and other disclosure frameworks like CDP became more and more popular. How is data actually collected and aggregated and disclosed to investors, for example, and how could technology support that process? So if we just think about the E piece alone, what Measurabl does is essentially pull in utility meter level data, because most every building has utility meters. And so we're pulling in energy and water data from the utility providers, if that's an option that's set up by our users. Also, waste collection, we're calculating carbon emissions based on the energy usage. And we're also enriching that with other ESG data sets, right? So green building certifications, for example, LEED and green. We cover ordinances, which is essentially regulatory risk, especially within the US. There are a lot of municipalities and local governments who have recently implemented or are increasingly implementing energy and carbon benchmarking laws. And we're providing analytics on top of that for peer benchmarking, for target tracking to support real estate organizations set net zero targets, and then essentially integrating with GRESB and CDP, for example, to push that data has already been pre-populated in terms of what's been collected on the quantitative KPIs, so that reporting process can be made more streamlined. We're also providing physical climate risk data. So there are a lot of different data sets that we're pulling together and essentially trying to serve as a centralized platform, a kind of ESG hub, if you will, for the industry.
Yeah.
And that makes the measurement and management hopefully simpler, and most importantly, allows then managers to focus on the act. So if we think of, plan, do, check, act, the acting piece is obviously about implementing solutions that are going to help decarbonize the industry and both protect and future-proof from transitional and physical climate risk.
Yeah, but I guess we're going to the future-proofing part towards the end of this podcast. But Serene, your product is obviously more focused around IoT and indoor air quality. And congratulations on, I don't know if it's not that recent, you obviously had a partnership with Siemens, which is incredible. But talk us through how that affects the climate as well, because obviously it's more coming at it from a slightly different angle and more to do on the smart building side, potentially climate tech.
Yeah, we're seeing that investors of real estate are requiring to see real changes and reduction in carbon emissions. And we believe that getting real-time data versus data after the fact is really important to affect real change. So we play in getting data that is either missing or typically after the fact in the E side with environmental around energy data and water data and things like that. On the S side, the social side, health and wellness and indoor air quality monitoring and getting that type of data in real time. And we believe that when you get real time data, it's more actionable and you can make real changes that are effective in real time. And that's how we feel that we participate in enabling this carbon reduction and the whole ESG improvements.
And since you both have been growing your products in this space, I'm sure you both alluded to that you've seen further adoption. Are there any sort of key trends you've seen in both your markets, be them slightly different? What major trends have you seen? Maybe Sarah, you can go first.
Yeah, I think most recently we've seen this evolution, right? Green, which was really focused on building certifications and sustainability awards for real estate companies, to ESG, which is a more holistic approach that's looking not only at the E, which of course is important from a climate standpoint, but increasingly, especially in a post-COVID environment, really emphasis on the S as well as G and looking at governance issues. Now, I think with the Paris Agreement and net zero targets, they're all aligned, as well as these different reporting frameworks like TCFD, for example, that are trying to support net zero by 2050. What we're really seeing is this push for decarbonizing the life cycle of real estate. And so I think it's helpful to be a SaaS company in that we're constantly enhancing, right, the software features and functionalities that will support our customers. And so that's really the evolution that we've been on with them. And so I think now it's fascinating because a lot of sustainable finance, for example, so green bonds and sustainability linked loans go toward the development or refinancing of green certified buildings. And yet there's also this huge opportunity for transforming the existing building stock. The EU, for example, I think puts it at 80 to 90% of all buildings that will exist in 2050 already exist today. And so that opportunity then to invest in retrofits and interventions that will reduce energy consumption and carbon emissions for existing buildings is there. And I think Serene really touched on the fact that this is moving, the trend that I see is moving from proxies for what is green to this real demand from investors and other stakeholders, including regulators now, for actual asset level data that's granular, that is based on operational performance and increasingly real time to see how is the building operating, what is its impact on the environment, and what steps are being taken to transform or to transition business models so that going forward, it's aligning with these global trajectories toward net zero by 2050.
Hi, this is Nelson from Property Quants. I'd like to invite you to join our Introduction to Data Science and Machine Learning for Real Estate seminar. To learn more, visit propertyquants.com/seminar and use special code LMRE20 on Eventbrite for a discount.
You've obviously worked across different markets. So the US has seen a change in president, a change in maybe things they've slightly focused on when it comes down to the climate. Are there any massive differences you've seen in adoption of sustainable tech across like even markets from even your sort of sustainable finance days to now?
Yeah, overall, clearly there's a growing interest, right, globally when it comes to this topic of ESG, whether it's the fund flows we're seeing in ESG-focused funds or the investment flows coming into climate tech. The last figure I saw was something like over 14 billion already at the first half of this year in climate tech alone, and funds closing that were equal to what's closed within the last 5 years. So a lot of momentum globally, but generally speaking, I think what we see is that within Europe, there's obviously a lot of awareness and prioritization of sustainability, clearly a much more developed regulatory framework with the EU's Green New Deal and raft of sustainable finance regulations. But interestingly, tech adoption is a bit more advanced in North America. So what we see are some unique opportunities in that you have this huge awareness and regulatory as well as investor drivers within Europe, but maybe not a completely satiated tech environment yet. So there's opportunity there. And then in the US, likewise, openness to tech adoption. But now with the new administration, increasingly rejoining the Paris Agreement, and it looks like more regulation will come into play. So I think all of those things work in favor in terms of this industry that we find ourselves in.
Now, sorry to read, what have you seen in terms of trends within, obviously, air quality? You mentioned of the vast increase in that space, but yeah, you can probably talk a lot more around sort of the data analytics as well.
Yeah, like Sarah said, commercial real estate is one of the largest asset class in the world, but less than 1% of CRE space is digital or digitized. And at the same time, the whole CRE space is moving beyond just prioritizing locations to also including improving of experience and including analytics in the way they operate the space. And that requires data. We're seeing the move towards real estate as a service is a big trend, which requires more digitization than what's available out there. And that's where we come in with Senseware, being a platform, an IoT platform that can connect anything in a retrofit capacity and get more and more data to help with this new way of operating and managing commercial real estate spaces. There's more digital, includes more useful data. And like you mentioned with the post-COVID, we really change how we think about being indoors and the air that we breathe and the spaces where we spend 90% of our time. Before COVID, no one was really thinking about how indoor spaces can affect our health. Now we're thinking more about ventilation in this space. We look around if, there are filtration. We try to read about what the space is doing around improving air quality and on monitoring that, which include, do they know CO2 levels, humidity, occupancy levels, and things like that. So that's becoming more in demand. And also people should be in the spaces so that everyone is feeling safe and comfortable is a big push and a big question that everyone is asking. And we're giving organization CRE leaders the data that they need to understand the health of their space more so today than before.
Would you say, and there's another question around of what education needs to be done with that? Obviously, you can get that sort of data. Are they often reading into it, reading around it? What more do you think, from both your opinions, what more do you think needs to be done in the educational space? Maybe Sarah, you can go first.
I think it's very helpful to look at the element of systemic risk in this when it comes to education. And yes, there's always been a kind of financial imperative in terms of, okay, greater energy efficiency absolutely reduces expenses, increases NOI. And so there's a immediate or fairly short payback period for a lot of these types of energy efficiency investments. But I think it's worth looking at climate risk as well as the pandemic. These are issues of systemic risk where it's not building by building, but it's basically, are the buildings prepared and resilient in terms of what risks it may be facing going forward. So I think education around that piece could definitely continue to evolve. And I think that's what we're seeing happen. I think the challenge is the timeframes involved and trying to find the balance between shorter term investment horizon and the longer term climate impacts, let's say, has been a challenge in the past. But I think as regulations coming into play and as we're seeing the very real impacts of either COVID-19 or extreme weather events due to climate change, it's becoming more obvious and more of a reality for the industry. So I think understanding that in order to protect asset value and be a good fiduciary, then these things have to be viewed in terms of risk and investments made around that.
Yeah. And Serene, what about you? Obviously, you hold a sort of PhD, you're a doctor, you're very well educated. What do you think needs to be done on the educational piece?
We put valuable data into the hands of leaders, and without access to that real-time data, we're inevitably losing money every day. And so we believe that people in today's world, they understand the value of the data, but there is more of the need to educate them on what to do with that data, and then refining the data set that they get access to. And that's a big component of what we do at Senseware. And with all of our customers, we serve as a resource and a partner to help them bring that IoT vision through this data to life and help them thinking through what to do with that data is a big component. It's the greatest moment to us as a company when a customer comes and says, if it wasn't for Senseware, we would never have known that there's a power outage, and that would have caused a lot of disruption for our work and whatnot. So educating based on each business what that type of data and how that could help is a big piece.
In terms of helping, whether it's now and in the future, are there any particular things that you're predicting when it comes down to real estate and how it's going to change in terms of adopting technology and what maybe real estate, how it's sort of run? Serene, if you want to go first.
Yeah, I think just because there's an understanding that the built environment, a lot of it is aging and whatnot, and technology, a lot of technology is obsolete. So when you talk about real-time data from these types of assets, the misconception is that it's just going to be really hard to get the data. And that's where we try to tell the market that we have a solution technology exists that is actually easy to get that type of data, especially from old aging infrastructure. It's more important for us to know what's happening in real time around the clock, around these critical aspects of the building. Yeah, so that's a big piece that we just try to educate the market on the fact that there is an easy way of using IoT and getting all the different data that matters. And the last thing I'll add is just that we're technology experts, so that they don't have to be. That's one of the things that we've learned from dealing with this market and this industry is that they really look for companies like us, the technology providers, to be a partner more than just a vendor, because it could be really overwhelming to incorporate more technology, additional data into the space. And that's a big aspect of what we do, is helping our clients figure out their data strategy. And a lot of times it's starting with one use, energy monitoring, water monitoring, and then air quality. And then the next one, they expand from there. That's been working really well.
Yeah, it's wearing them down. It's building on your case study. Look, like I said at the beginning, I've been following what Senseware you've been achieving, and it's pretty impressive. And I think it was Brad from GreenGen who originally introduced us, and obviously he's an incredible ambassador of you as well. And most people in this space know Green Generation are. So if they're sort of backing you, that's a pretty good case study as well. Now, Sarah, any sort of future trends you're anticipating?
Yeah, I think there will be more convergence around ESG and climate. So what I mean by that is, I think Serene is spot on around transforming the building sector, having data that can inform what projects need to happen right at the building level in order to implement changes that will be effective in driving down carbon emissions, for example, or making it more attractive to occupants. And I think at Measurabl, we talk about meter to market. So I think increasingly connecting that line from, let's say, the most granular meter level data at a building all the way up to the market, which traditionally is thought of as maybe the market for buying and selling property, but increasingly is also the capital markets and finance. And so I think we'll continue to see the growth of green and sustainability labeled debt and equity, and need for more robust verification of these types of funds being allocated for projects will continue to grow the need for this. So I think that technology could continue to help support the development of that.
Agreed with that. Did you know that the average cost of making a bad hire in the real estate market is £60,000? Or if you're listening to us from the US, that's $83,000. Finding out an employee is moving on is never great news, but sadly, it's unavoidable. The cost of hiring so high, it's important to get it right the first time round. So if you're struggling to find the right candidates, why not consider working with a recruitment agency? We're experts at finding the right people to fill roles. And because we already have a database to hand, we can speed up the process too. So head to lmre.tech to brief us on your next hire. Ladies, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of the show, but obviously, like I said, we do the LMRE part, and it's a chance for our audience to get to know you guys a little bit more personally and may learn from a few things you guys have gone through as well, from whether it's sort of, Serene, you founding a business, and Sarah, you sort of moving into a completely different type of business and sort of world. So, Serene, why don't you start us off? It goes, 1, your main lessons learned. 2, it's give anyone a special shout out or product. Could be a couple of people. R is what's been the most rewarding part of working in this space. And E, what are you most excited about when it comes down to the future of prop tech, real estate, the built environment? So if you want to start us off, Serene, and I can talk you through it as well. But yeah, main lessons learned.
I think over the last year, the main lessons we've learned is that things are always changing and can change pretty rapidly. And it's important to always just stay up to date and be flexible and change where the market takes you. That's very true for the prop tech space and what's happening there, and not to be afraid of having the opinion on the future of it. Yeah, that's my L. As far as mention on a people person, I think just so many people and companies that come to mind, but shout out to my co-founder, Julian Stamatakis, who's been really evolving the technology to meet with the rapidly changing industry and helping us create a brand out there that people look for when they're thinking about data from the real estate space. On the customer side, Boston Properties came to mind. They're one of our first customers and have been really showing leadership in the space and the series space and prioritizing now safety and comfort of tenants as part of their moving forward plan. So that was very admirable to see, and we're happy to be part of that. Let's see, R, rewarding. I love that prop tech touches the lives of many and how our technology has direct impact on people and helping make their lives better. And at the end of the day, data is empowering and it helps you make more informed decisions. I love that about my work. Exciting. Let's see. COVID has brought even more innovation out of the prop tech space, I believe. And I'm excited for us as a society to continue to move into a world where energy, environment, sustainability, and tech intersect. And I believe that bringing these sectors together will not only be better for the world, but will also be better for our bottom line.
Absolutely nailed that one, Serene. Thank you so much. It's so free flowing. Right, Sarah, a lot to compete with. Let's start with what's one of the main lessons you've learned.
Yes, I think just emerging from the trajectory of my career, I would say to follow one's natural interest and curiosity. But it really helps in terms of work not feeling like work and aligning with your values. And in terms of how that melds with my work at Measurabl, it's just a great place to meld enthusiasm and passion with data-driven decision making, whether that's around product development or agile processes or this really fascinating time where we see such growing market demand around ESG and climate tech. Yeah, following one's interests.
I like that.
That's my L. And I mention it's so difficult because indeed I feel there's so many people who have contributed to where I am and where Measurabl is today. This is going to sound strange to give a shout out to a country, but what comes to mind is to give a shout out to the Netherlands.
Anything goes for the show, Sara.
But it's had such an outsized impact in terms of ESG and sustainability. And my adopted country as the catalyst for my pivot into sustainable finance, the birthplace of many sustainability initiatives and getting grads and PGAF and many things. So that's my shout out.
Are there any sort of products within the Netherlands which you're following or a big supporter of?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm really fascinated in, which is a little bit tangential to our conversation, is circular economy. But there's some amazing innovations going on here around waste. And in particular, some really fascinating things being done in the built environment where materials are being cataloged and coded for reuse and recycling when the building's life cycle is over. So I think there's some really interesting initiatives going on around in that space.
And now, what about what's been the most rewarding part? Is it working across the different markets, seeing the growth? What is it?
Yeah, I think in terms of prop tech, what's really rewarding is that there's just such opportunity for transformation. You know, real estate, which has historically been considered an antiquated industry and slow to change, had this amazing opportunity. It's really ripe for innovation. And so I think working in that space is exciting. And as far as the E goes, what am I excited about in the future of prop tech? I think that there's still the chance for mainstream adoption, right? There's still so much opportunity for market penetration and for prop tech in general. And then as we look at the potential to transform the existing building stock through all kinds of decarbonization initiatives and data, forming that really exciting to me. And of course, the intersection of prop tech and sustainable finance will continue to motivate me, I think.
Well, let's hope. But unfortunately, we are now at the end of the podcast. Like I know our audience loved hearing both the stories more about your businesses as well and the growth of the sector, but also the challenges that we're up against in the future. But I feel like we're on the right track. And I want to thank you both for joining me on the Propcast. Yeah, I'm looking forward to following up with you both after the show and hopefully meeting you guys all in person. But thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Propcast. And a big thanks to our guests and our sponsors, Cretech and ReamTech. Make sure you visit our website, lmre.tech, where you can subscribe to our newsletter, keep up with our industry news and events, or if you're looking for your next career move, it's all on there. The Propcast can be found on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, where all good content is found. Whilst we're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate it if you could spread the word and tell a friend about it, or even write us a review. And I'll catch you next week.